So, I've taken a look at some of the Xbox 360's and Xbox One's best backwards compatible games, so now let's turn our attention to Microsoft's first entrant into the console market with the original Xbox. Making this video was a hell of a lot of fun revisiting these older games, and hopefully it brings back some memories for you, or if you're too young to have experienced the original Xbox, maybe this will persuade you to try some of these games from yesteryear. But we need to remember that these are quite old and some fare better than others when replaying them today, but they also include auto HDR on the newer hardware. It's not always for the better, depending on the game, but if you like the video, then please like, comment, subscribe, and share it around on whichever platforms you visit, and let's get to the list. Coming in at number 12 is PANZER DRAGOON ORTA, where you take on ORTA, a teenage girl who is being held prisoner and is rescued by a dragon. This series has been around for many years now, beginning life on the Sega Saturn. This is an on-rails shooter, so you don't have free reign to go anywhere you want, but it's still great fun all these years later, telling a decent story to go along with the fun gameplay as you fly around on your dragon, shooting off projectiles at your enemies, large ships and monsters as you make your way through each of the levels. Controls are quite good, and the game still looks pretty damn fantastic even today. Of course it lacks what modern games have, but it runs beautifully and benefits from the better graphical fidelity that Xbox backwards compatibility brings with it. There aren't a lot of on-rail shooters, and especially ones with this visual style, so if you find it may be of interest to you, then check it out, and it's very cheap on the Xbox store as well. Next at number 11 we have SSX3, and to say this is impressive graphically is quite the understatement, as this already looked quite good when it first came out on the original Xbox, but now with backwards compatibility and the extra fidelity and addition of auto HDR, the graphics simply pop at times, even if the backgrounds are a little bit low res. Seeing the large snow-covered mountains being lit means we get to experience this snowboarding downhill racing trick-filled snowfest like never before. It has that early 2000s feel which continued the trend from the 90s, where there were a lot of extreme sports games out there, from snowboarding, motocross, BMX and skateboarding. This still controls fantastically, and you'll be catching huge air and pulling off flips and grab tricks in no time. You'll choose one of several snowboarders and tackle the various events or challenges all over the mountain. This game was fun as hell back in the day, and it still is today. So at number 10 we have Star Wars Battlefront 2, the original from 2005, and you can include the original here as well. This brings with it several game modes, including a campaign, galactic conquest, where you command a fleet and try to take over and protect planets, and where you earn credits to unlock bonuses and characters, for example, or jump into instant action and battle it out in hunt or capture the flag modes over maps taken from the original and prequel trilogy. And here you can play as several classes and even Jedi and Sith characters and swap between different ones when you die. Players can also get to play in third or first person's perspective depending on the situation, plus also get to take part in space battles as well. The game does offer a lot, especially when compared to the Battlefront remake a few years back. The game runs smooth as silk and looks pretty damn good still, with character models being decent, animations are more simplistic, but the maps and environments do look very good, and they benefit from auto HDR too. If you're interested in why the newest Battlefront were seen as maybe a letdown for many players, check out the originals, as they're still fun to play either against bots or in multiplayer if you can find a game. Exploding in at number 9, we have possibly one of the most technically impressive games on the list in Red Faction 2, a first-person shooter filled with a variety of weapons to take down your enemies, who don't show too much intelligence to be honest, but you won't mind too much as the controls and feel of this first-person shooter is still very good today. Not to the level of many modern games, but I still had a blast playing this game again. But the reason it's perhaps remembered the most is for the level of destruction on display. Not a big deal today, but this was really impressive for the original Xbox. You'll be able to blast holes in walls or take out the base of a structure and watch it all come crashing down. It's all big, dumb, old school fun, and it's great. Pretty much a linear experience which works well, and there is a story here, but it isn't the reason to play it. Play this to check out the destruction and what could be done on hardware which is 20 years old on a home console. It's genuinely still fun to play now and great to revisit it so easily with backwards compatibility. At number 8 we have a classic in the Elder Scrolls Morrowind. This was almost a miracle at the time that a game this large, well huge, could even run at all on a console at that time, but there are trade-offs which you'll notice right away. But firstly, this game looks quite good for what it is, thanks to the cleaner image as opposed to the original's 480p. The textures do look horrible by today's standards, and character animations of the NPCs are very basic and unnatural, but for this to exist on the original Xbox was such a large feat. Being an Elder Scrolls game, there are a gigantic amount of quests to do and a huge open world to explore, all with some of the best and most memorable music that I've heard in the game. I can still hear the main title theme whenever I think of this, but the age of the game may turn off many players, as there is a huge amount of fog that shrouds almost everything, and it's quite close as well, so expect the landscapes, buildings, trees and everything else to slowly fade into existence the closer you get to them. This isn't like Oblivion or Skyrim, for example, where you can see far off into the distance, and this I feel will be the main hurdle for many players. If you can overcome this, then Morrowind is still a deep and engrossing experience, but just remember this is almost 20 years old, and games such as this almost exclusively existed on the PC at the time. But give it a go if it intrigues you, or you want even more Elder Scrolls. Coming in at number 7 is Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, and this is one where you can include the other games in the series as well, such as Pandora Tomorrow, Double Agent, and the original, with Double Agent being my least favourite. But Chaos Theory is often seen as the best one in the series, especially on the Xbox, if not the whole series, including the 360 games too. This is much more stealth focused and needing to stay out of sight like the original was, as opposed to the more action focused later games such as Conviction and even Blacklist to a point. The lighting is still impressive, if simplistic due to the age of the game, but this was damn impressive back all those years ago. Having returned to the game recently, animation and movement is also on the simplistic side, so some of the sheen it had in my memory has worn off a bit, but it's still part of a great series that is worth checking out, and considering we haven't had a new Splinter Cell in years, maybe this will give you some of that Splinter Cell fix you might need. Up at number 6, we have perhaps the most difficult game on the list with Ninja Gaiden Black. This fast-paced hack and slash still holds up today with its responsive controls and quick movement system as you dart around the levels, taking out the enemies, needing to harness all of your moveset when surrounded by them in groups. You play as Ryu Hayabusa, who after a raid on Hayabusa village must track down the Dark Dragon Blade from Doku. Ninja Gaiden still holds up very well today, with the biggest issue it has is the erratic and frustrating camera at times. You'll regularly lose sight of Ryu going around a corner, for example, so you'll need to adjust it constantly, as you'll always be running into enemies and fighting them from all sides. The game is also very difficult, so if you're after a challenge in something that is action-packed, then give this incredibly long-running series a go for sure. And at number 5, we have Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, with the galaxy far, far away making another appearance on the list. And it doesn't stop there. Whereas Battlefront 2 focused on large-scale battles and multiplayer, Jedi Academy is far more focused on the storytelling side of things, as players take on the role of Jaden, a Padawan who has constructed his or her own lightsaber. After the Academy is attacked by a group called the Disciples and Luke Skywalker's journal is stolen, you head out on a number of missions over several destinations. Now, Jedi Academy is a dated-looking game, both in its visuals and animations, but it's made up by having a great story and being able to customize your character along with the color of your lightsaber, using it in battles, plus having access to other weapons and force powers attributed to both light and dark sides is great. Playing it again recently, it did take a small amount of time to get accustomed to the look and dated presentation, but then I really started enjoying it again. If you've never played an older Star Wars game such as this, Jedi Outcast or even Dark Forces, then it's worthy of checking out. Coming in at number 4 is another really impressive game from a technical standpoint, and it's the first-person shooter of Black. Again, this has auto HDR and some good visual detail, even though the auto HDR isn't perfect at all, but still, seeing the game run like this made me think this could pass for an earlier Xbox 360 game. It's pretty impressive really. In terms of the gameplay itself, this is more of how shooters used to be, with no aiming down sights on your guns, similar to how Halo was. It controls well, and the guns do have a beefy sound when firing them, and you'll get to do it across varied levels. There are several difficulty settings, but this game also has a checkpoint system during each level, but you only have these on those levels which are larger. If you die on those smaller stages, then it's all the way back to the start to try again. On higher difficulty settings, it will definitely pose a challenge, as there is really no stealth in the game, as enemies can see you pretty easily, even from quite a distance away, and they can be pretty accurate when it comes to putting bullets in you too. But even despite these issues, Black is just really good to play. It was then and still is now. Up at number 3 is Jade Empire from BioWare. When BioWare was just churning out bangers, before Dragon Age and Mass Effect, and after the likes of the excellent Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights, Jade Empire sees BioWare somewhat take on Oriental culture in this great looking, lush world of the Jade Empire. As the Spirit Monk, you fend off an attack on your village and eventually go on an adventure to rescue your master. Jade Empire has all the hallmarks of a BioWare game of that time. Lots of dialogue choices, a morality system, which is welcome, if not a little too simplistic sometimes. Plus it incorporated a real-time combat system and allowed players to choose between several male and female characters and whether they focused more on combat or magic use. This game is often forgotten as it wasn't based on a large existing property like the next game on the list, but it's still worth playing today, even if it's just for the story, characters and setting, and just to revisit the BioWare of the 90s and 2000s. If it's dated in parts, Jade Empire is still an excellent game. So at number 2 is Knights of the Old Republic, another BioWare RPG which is still brought up regularly as to how fond people still look at this game and how the internet would melt down if a remake was announced. Just like Jade Empire, we have a wealth of voice dialogue and a large number of choices to make as we venture throughout places associated with the Star Wars universe. This game's story and quests are excellent, and even though it's incredibly dated these days in terms of graphical quality and animations, it's still a classic and deserves to be played. Of course, especially for anyone who is a Star Wars fan. It's also quite lengthy, and for someone who isn't a big fan of turn-based combat, this has a good blend of turn-based and real-time. There's so many people to interact with over the several planets you'll visit. KOTOR is one of those older games where the only area where it was let down was that the technology of the day couldn't bring it all to life in that much more detail. BioWare did an exceptional job with this game, and it deserves to still be played by Star Wars and RPG fans. It's a classic. And coming in at number 1 is Crimson Skies High Road to Revenge, and this takes out the top spot for the reason that it still plays so damn well all these years later. It's obviously an older game due to the visuals, but the way it still plays is just excellent, and I was enjoying myself just as much as I did all those years ago. This game most definitely needs a sequel, but it also must retain its setting or something similar, plus its charming style and sense of humour. It made me think of Uncharted, and even more so since the main character is also called Nathan, except Crimson Skies came out years before, set in an alternate 1930s as the leader of an air pirate gang, flying around this world and shooting down planes, upgrading our own or stealing others, all just feels so satisfying. The game also still looks damn good, and I just love the design of the planes and how everything is structured. This series has laid dormant for far too long, and with the technology of Microsoft's new systems and seeing what's been done with Microsoft Flight Simulator, this series could come back with a bang. This is just pure fun and deserves to be revisited once again or played for the first time. So that's my list for the original Xbox games that deserve to be played via backwards compatibility, as there is so much here to be enjoyed. It was just awesome revisiting these games, and I hadn't played them for so long, and just once again shows that having all of these games able to be played on newer hardware is just fantastic, and I'll be going back to them again in the future. So if you liked the video, then please give it a like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and give it a share wherever you enjoy sharing content, and I'll see you on the next video.